Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast, where we suddenly find ourselves in November and beginning to think about the lessons we might have learned this year, and also what the trends that have happened this year mean now and what they're going to mean in 2023. So today I want to explore the world of cybersecurity, cyber awareness, before we start talking about the New Year's resolutions and New Year, New Me and all that kind of stuff. So today I've invited Mark Hughes from DXC Technology onto the podcast to talk about what they're seeing as an organisation that secures many, many complex IT environments for their customers. And hopefully we're going to explore the best cybersecurity approaches for fighting the enemy within and not automatically trusting everybody within the corporate network, and also how to make cybersecurity a top priority at board level, how to practice smart security in the metaverse, and maybe reveal a few cybersecurity tales from the trenches along the way. How does that sound? Good answer. Well, buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to London here in the UK, where you can join me and Mark Hughes from DXC Technology talking about all things cybersecurity. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Mark. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Well, Neil, thank you so much. And it's great to be with you today. And hello to everyone. So I'm Mark Hughes. I look after security right across DXC Technology. So very much right in the thick of all matters security, both for DXC and for all of the customers that DXC supports as well.
Fantastic. Now, something I love to do with all my guests is take them back in time for a moment. So I've got to ask, can you remember where your passion for tech came from, or the moment that put you on the path that you're on right now, and the days when everyone likened you to a certain footballer from Manchester United?
Well, look, we'll leave the Manchester United thing, but look, DXC is very, very proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with Manchester United. And although by my namesake, obviously, is a huge Manchester United, hugely important person to Manchester United. DXC right now in the middle of working alongside Manchester United. You'll see us emblazoned on the sleeve of the team at the moment as well. So, but look, to answer the question, my passion for security and technology specifically really comes from the fact that, where we are at the moment is that we still see people being targeted and becoming victims of, really serious stuff that's going on that causes people a lot of harm. And so my passion for technology, and then very specifically in the security space, comes from thinking we really have to do something about redressing that balance to stop people becoming victims of the type of stuff that we see. And I'm sure, Neil, you know people, maybe in your friends and family group as well, who perhaps have been targeted, who've had their identity stolen, worse, have had then, because of that, have lost out financially as well. And we see some really harrowing stories. So my passion about really making security now, really overcoming the security challenge for many organizations, is about just trying to stop that type of harm from happening. And so really that's where my background comes at it from, and where I really look at how we can make, frankly, the world a better place for trying to overcome some of the security challenges that we can see.
And of course, it was that passion that would lead you to DXC eventually. And as we come out of a cybersecurity month and head into November, I'm curious, have you seen any big changes this year? Are things improving? Because as soon as I put on the news, I'm hearing things that the Home Secretary is using over here is using a personal email instead of a government email. The ex-Prime Minister got her phone hacked. So in one day, I was quite hopeful coming out of October, but I switch on the news and I'm not. But I'm curious, what are you seeing? Are things improving?
I think it just goes to show that we have to be ever more vigilant. It's not a thing that we're overcoming, and as such, there's still a lot more to do. And yes, those examples that you gave just go to really focus our minds on the need that everyone, regardless of who we are, really needs to be focused on making sure that we keep all that is dear to us and all that may be sensitive to us really safe by using the types of tools that are out there. I think the thing is, Neil, is that overall, whilst those are very high profile incidents, notwithstanding that, really becoming very much aware through things like Cybersecurity Awareness Month of what's out there and how we can all really take that responsibility on, but always within the context of, let's not forget, everything that we use all day, every day drives tremendous advantage for us, for me, certainly, with the stuff that I can do on my phone now, banking, all those things. But that comes with a need to be, all that benefit comes with a need to be really vigilant about making sure that we're really on it and understanding what's going on. And I think when I look at taking a step back, I think things are definitely improving. I think we're definitely getting better, but boy, that doesn't mean that we're there yet. We've got a long way to go. And these incidents that we still continually see, frankly, we should be able to do better than some of the stuff that we can see going on, and we can do better, and then basically reset the playing field a bit to level it out a bit.
Now, DXC, of course, manages mission-critical systems for thousands of large organisations around the world, and giving the company a much larger lens for understanding cyber attacks and how they occur. And if I look back on my own IT career, I've seen just how much things have changed, because traditionally, of course, everything was trusted within the corporate network and everything outside was distrusted. But those days are long gone now, because quite often the biggest enemy is the enemy within. So what kind of cybersecurity approaches should businesses adopt for fighting that enemy within and not automatically trusting everyone within?
Yeah, and that's it. You've hit the nail on the head. That big migration that most organizations are going, and almost that luxury position of being able to assume the perimeter was it, and therefore then everything within it was okay, and then controlling people through maybe network controls, network security related controls in the past. That really has gone. Those perimeters are now micro perimeters that exist around all of the SaaS and cloud-based services that we consume. And don't forget, there's still a lot of legacy out there as well, where those data centers and those applications still sit within those environments as well. So managing that complexity, I think, is the thing. When I look at our customers across the thousands of customers that DXC has, and being right in the middle of those customers, managing that complexity that has now grown up through all the benefit that comes from all of those great services, is the really big challenge that most of us have. Now, that said, it's not impossible, and it's about really being diligent in a way which we haven't had to be diligent before. It's about making sure that the control around all those environments is in place. And what I mean by that is that when people are developing all those great new services that we benefit from as consumers as well, that they are really thinking almost natively about what the part that security has to play in that, and defining who should and who should not have access to it. For example, what type of data should be there, how that should be stored and managed in compliance with the various rules and regs that are around. So there's no doubt, to get into that, Neil, you have to do a lot more thinking, be a lot more diligent. But look, I look at that always as a relatively small overhead to bear when you think about all the benefit that comes with it. But it's not an easy thing to do. And actually, most of it is about being organized and about being diligent and managing that transition to some of those great, SaaS and cloud-based services that we see in a very detailed way. So not impossible, eminently doable, but complexity is the challenge that most organizations are facing that I see.
And of course, a lot of businesses all around the world now are struggling with the economic climate and are having to do more with less. And all this comes at a time when most budgets are shrinking. Worldwide security spending is expected to grow. So I'm curious, is that a message that the boardroom now completely understands? Or are you still seeing that traditional approach or resistance of, hey, it might happen and it might not, so do we really need to spend it? Are those attitudes changing now?
Yeah, absolutely, Neil. I think there's no doubt, with all the stuff that we've already spoken about today in terms of incidents, that most boards that I interact with, which many of, absolutely don't need to be convinced that there is an issue. They really do understand what the issue is. The understanding of how that may impact them, still more work to do. Right. So that's about risk management, and it's not just about security, it's about understanding what the overarching risk is for an organization, and then how you turn that into, well, where do your controls need to be? Because that's always going to be specific to that particular organization and then to who they rely upon in their supply chain. Let's not forget that's a really important part of this. So I think the attitude, definitely in terms of having to convince people that this is something that is serious, that needs to be taken seriously, we're well beyond that. Into then really understanding what the implications are for that particular organization if something were to go wrong financially. More work to do, because you need to get to ever more fidelity. In terms of the budget piece, then there's often that almost mismatch, which is, well, therefore we understand we need to spend more money. Okay, that's all right. But then on what exactly? And that's the bit which I think when we get down into where I see a lot of our customers in amongst that complexity, really then getting down to say, where do I really get my best bang for my buck? And I'll tell you something which is quite interesting that I see across many organizations. Organizing yourself to be able to understand where you should focus your investment is almost as big a challenge as actually then making the investment and spending the money as well. So that's about being really diligent, as I said before, about what's at risk, where's at risk, who can access what, and how do we create the monitoring around that to understand what's actually going on. A lot of that isn't necessarily and doesn't necessarily require an investment in itself. It's about understanding the importance of perhaps one application over another, for example, one service over another. And then once that has been done, what risk there and what financial value that risk potentially carries to an organization if something goes wrong, then making the investment. So yeah, funny enough, quite often I look at it and say, yeah, there may well be money available, but let that piece of precursor work to understand what your risk is and how you manage that risk is as if not more important to then really getting the best return on that investment.
Yeah, 100% with you on that. And over there, the last few months, we've had Mike McDaniel from DXC. He's been on the podcast 3 times before now. And the last time he came on, we were discussing the metaverse. And I've been to several tech conferences this year. Again, a big trend. Everyone's talking about the metaverse, businesses getting involved. I'm curious, does this keep you awake at night? And from a security standpoint, can you talk about how to practice smart security in the metaverse? Because that must be the first thing that you're thinking when you see these headlines, right?
Well, I most certainly am. Identity is what I'm going to say, because, it's a challenge for most organizations, even for us in our own personal lives, about making sure that, when you have an identity, how do you manage that identity? How do you make sure that you maintain the security around it? So when you're in the metaverse, that, you have some element of being able to establish the veracity of the people who are there and who are legitimately should be there, depending upon the environment that you are actually in and what you're doing. And of course, that actually is no different from a lot of the stuff that we do now. But of course, it really does manifest itself writ large in the metaverse itself. And what I mean by that is, when you're in those environments, be it, if it's a corporate implementation, if you want, where people are going in for maybe a conference type or with a sort of virtual reality plus type arenas that many people will be familiar with now. We do a lot of that in DXC. And really, is that person who they say they are, have you established, have they been authenticated as that individual? It's no different from having a conversation if you want, chat, email, all those things. But it's just a different environment in the metaverse. And that's in the sort of closed group type corporate approach. Think about it more in our personal lives, how we then introduce ourselves into those environments. How can we establish that we know who we genuinely are talking to and what are the checks and balances and controls around that? And also then how do we protect our own identity? So therefore, authentication, think about multi-factor authentication, all of those things apply just as much. So a bit around identity and of course, by extension, then privacy that comes around that. So again, what types of conversations, who are we interacting with and how? And I suppose overall, the overarching thing beyond those is just the fact that the metaverse allows them for much greater, broader attack surface. And so, threat actors will look to exploit the fact that when we get into using the metaverse, that then obviously produces a greater attack surface. I think my final point on it, Neil, is let's not forget about how we as individuals and our identities and how we represent ourselves in the metaverse, mixing up those lines are already a little bit blurred between work and non-work, I think will accelerate that a bit. So yeah, even more reason to be really careful about how we protect our identity, and obviously that flows from that as well.
A quick shout out to today's sponsor, Nextiva. If you find yourself switching between a bunch of different apps just to talk to your customers and your team, you need Nextiva, because Nextiva helps you calm the madness of customer and team conversations by giving you just one place to call, text, chat, email and video meet. And the real special thing here is that you'll see the entire conversation history in a single thread. So now when a customer contacts you, you'll see their entire story, so you can say the right thing right now. So get one app to manage all of your customer and team conversations by getting Nextiva. And you can do that by visiting nextiva.com/techtalk Daily. We started the conversation today talking about your origin story, what put you on this path. If I now ask you to reflect on your career in tech, I'm sure you've got more than a few war stories that you've picked up along the way. So can you share any cybersecurity tales from the trenches and maybe a few lessons along the way? Because there's got to be a few, right?
I could, Neil, and I could talk about lots of different things, but I'm afraid I'm going to, for everyone listening, I'm going to take you back to, I could talk about nation state actors and all those things that we love to talk about. But the thing that actually we should really be talking about in the space, and I've touched on it a bit already, is most of the things that I see, the so-called really sophisticated things, and they may well be sophisticated, but even the ones that aren't sophisticated, they all start generally with something relatively simple. They start with something that we eminently, easily can prevent from being, a victim of if we get ourselves better organized. So I would say my biggest war story of the lot is if we only did a few things really well and, ubiquitously implemented multi-factor authentication, managed identities, looked after our Active Directory estates and implementations, whether they're Azure Active Directory or on-prem or mix of both, and make sure that we know what the perimeter of our organizations are in terms of where we're broadcasting. So managing things like VPNs and stuff. If we only did those things really well, we could be so much better. And as I said earlier, just create more of a level playing field. Because at the moment, the bad people out there who are intent on causing harm have still the ability to be able to circumnavigate the types of controls that we should be able to get right. So I'm afraid I'm not going to regale you with fascinating stories and all that sort of stuff. I could do, but I really want the message I really want to land is, look, if anyone listening is involved in this, even in their own personal life, go and use the native tooling that you've got there. It does not necessarily going to cost you a lot, but just make sure you've got those basic things done well, comprehensively, and you'll solve for a whole load of trouble and hopefully not become the next victim of the type of stuff that we see. Because at the moment, as I said earlier, the threat actor type community often still don't need to try particularly hard to get a foothold in some organizations. And that's something that I'm sure with a concerted effort, with the type of people listening to the great audience that you have and such a broad way across the globe can really help make a difference.
Love that. That's a perfect answer. I will forgive you for not dishing the dirt on some of the things you've seen over the years, and that's some real practical advice there, so pure gold. But I'm curious, you are the solutions guy. You've got the ear of so many big businesses and brands all around the world, and they come to you asking for your help. You provide them with solutions. But what keeps you up at night, and how do you keep your curiosity and open-mindedness alive when you hear about things like the metaverse and new technologies and finding us solutions to that?
Well, Neil, I'm the luckiest guy in the world, really, because of the way I look at it. It's the first things first I always say to me and my team, we're on the side of doing the right thing. And that's a tremendous motivation for me. So I have a curiosity about what I do. I always say in security, you have to be always extremely curious, not just in terms of what's happening more broadly to your question, but also in terms of the here and now. So when you see something that doesn't look right, be curious about it, and you need to be calm and curious, right? There's a lot in security that can immediately turn into something that can look quite dramatic, but remaining calm is pretty key alongside that curiosity. More broadly, of course, all those developments that you talk about, I'm always thinking about it from the point of view of, well, what will the impact of that be? And I'm not just talking about the things which are much more security related. I think at the moment a lot about quantum. I think a lot about AI, for example, and how AI can be used both maybe in an adversarial way as well as a positive way. Quantum, I already mentioned in terms of what's coming down the line there. People talk a lot about a post encryption in a post-quantum world, for example, or in a quantum world, I meant to say. So those things I am really curious about. I love reading about it. I love hearing more about it, and then thinking about how do we solve for that, and how do we create the environment that people can really exploit all the capabilities that come with that, but in a way which is secure. And actually, pretty importantly, Neil, there are sometimes some real key interventions that need to be made along, when we're into standard setting and the way things develop, to make sure that the security wrapper gets thought about that, ground up as opposed to trying to be bolted on afterwards. And I think we are making a bit of progress there, frankly, in some of those newer things that are coming along. Lots more to do, but those are the things that keep me up at night and keep me curious and just passionate about this field, because we've got so much more to do and there's so much we can do to stop some of the bad things that we see happening.
And of course, we are approaching that time of the year where we get a little bit reflective, looking back at the year and what we've learned along the way, and also looking to the future. What trends are exciting us? What role are those trends going to play in 2023? And what are you going to be doing in 2023? How are we going to change things? These are the thoughts that everybody's thinking at right now. So I've got to ask, what's next for you? What emerging trends excite you? And what's your big focus for the months ahead?
Yeah, so look, I think the bottom line is that in security now we are seeing a real need to consolidate the security tooling that many large organizations have deployed across their organizations. And that's not just me saying that. Many others are now realizing that, sometimes upwards of 20, 30 different types of tools inside a large enterprise, managing that to get a security picture of what's going on is extremely hard. So certainly what I'm really excited about now is that there is a real drive towards consolidation of security tooling to get better focus on the actual security as opposed to focusing just purely on running lots of security tools. And so there are some sort of platform type plays emerging now, which I really like the look of, and I'm really excited about. There's always going to be a bit of a best of breed, best of suite type argument, but I see that argument now beginning to diminish a bit in terms of best of breed, now moving much more to best of suite. Now, that doesn't change the fact that if there's native tooling embedded in cloud instances, for example, and other things, which is all great, that it still need to be managed and managed really well. So there's that need for the service wrapper around it. But the thing I'm really excited about, Neil, is that maybe in security now, we're going to be less about talking about the next tool, more about what the platform play is around that. Very specifically, when you look at the developments around extended detection and response, for example, as an area where security tooling is now looking at right across that and bringing those signals together to give us more time and a bit more of a head start against some of the bad stuff that were happening. But that's what I'm really excited about. Consolidation into these platform plays, more focus then on the actual security, less necessarily on just simply having to implement and maintain a whole bag of different tools.
Well, first of all, a big thank you for sharing your insights with us today. But before I let you go, I'm going to ask you to share one more thing with us. And that's, I always ask my guests, can you share a song or something that's important to you that we can add to our Spotify playlist, or a book that we could add to our Amazon wish list that everyone listening could check out? All I ask is, what are you going to leave us with, and what's the reason behind your choice?
Well, I'm going to go for something really serious, actually. And it's really serious, and it means a lot to me. And it's a book. And I'm sure many listening have heard about it. It's a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And for those of you who've read it, and I like rereading it as well. For those who don't know, it's about Viktor Frankl, who was interned in a Nazi concentration camp during the Second World War. And, we can only imagine the horrific nature of everything that went on there. But the thing there's lots of things he's talking about. I'm not going to try and do a synopsis of the book, but the thing that always stands out for me, that the thing that he observed in the dreadful situation of the Holocaust, was the individuals always have, and we always have a choice, and we always have a choice about how we react to a situation. So people can, in ghastly situations, be dehumanized. They can have everything taken away from them. But the one thing you always still have is you have a choice about how you're going to react to any given situation. And now I think about that a lot, because, in security a lot, there's bad stuff that happens, and, people can get very stressed about it and everything else. We always have a choice about how we react in every given situation. And that can really change the course of what the outcome of those situations are if you choose to react in a certain way as opposed to another way. And there's no one who can ever, that's your choice. And that's our collective choice, if you want, for us as individuals. So Man's Search for Meaning is my book by Viktor Frankl. And it's certainly worth a read. It's actually not too much of a heavy read. It's a heavy read in the sense it's a heavy subject, but it's not a hugely long text. So worth a read if those listening haven't read it already. And I always like rereading it in any case.
Yeah, it really is a powerful read. I'll add that to the Amazon wish list so people can check that out. Now, I'm conscious DXC Technology is a huge website, and if anyone interested in just looking a little bit deeper into the cybersecurity side of things, or maybe even contacting your team, what's the best starting point? Is there any way you'd point them in?
Yep, you can learn all about DXC Technology and our security services and solutions by visiting dxc.com/security. And of course, you can follow us all on social media channels, the LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And I'm present on all of those, as is DXC as well. So that's the way.
Fantastic. I'll add that to the show notes so people can find you nice and easily. Again, thanks for coming on, talking about what you're seeing as an organisation that secures many complex IT environments for customers all over the world, and also what the see yourself in cyber can mean for the enterprise and not automatically trusting everything within a network. But more than anything, I think it's your personal story, and also those two words you mentioned, being calm and curious during those situations. Priceless advice, but just a big thank you for sharing that with me today.
Thank you to yourself, Neil, and to everyone who's listening.
So a huge thanks to Mark for coming on here, sharing his insights. We covered a lot in a short amount of time. And I'm curious, what are you seeing in the world of cybersecurity? And I don't just mean techies, I also mean businesses and your attitudes and approaches towards cybersecurity, cyber attacks, securing the hybrid working and working from any device, any location, anywhere, the challenges that you've come across, and also what you're going to be thinking about next year. What trends interest you? What trends concern you? And what are you doing about them? You've heard from me today. You've heard from Mark. But the reason I record this podcast every single day is to try and encourage a conversation where we can all share ideas. And it's not just about me and Mark saying, hey, we're the experts. It's about you getting your insights on here too. And there's a number of ways that you can do that. And you can email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. You can get me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram @Neil C. Hughes. And my website is techblogwriter.co.uk, where you'll find over 2,200 different interviews with Tech Talks Daily and the podcast I've hosted with Citrix and Netgear too, and also how you can work with me. So any questions or pictures to come on the show, send them over. Other than that, I cordially invite you to join me again tomorrow, where we'll explore a different industry and how technology is impacting it. So join me then, but if you don't have chance, don't worry. Just a big thank you for joining me today. And until next time, don't be a stranger.